Welcome to Optily Radio, your regular 30-minute dose of everything you need to accelerate your e-commerce marketing success.
Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of Optily Radio. I'm your host, Nina White, and in the virtual studio with us today is Keith Matthews. Keith is the Director of Digital and Strategy at Milk Bottle Labs, a Shopify development agency based in Dublin. Keith also hosts his own podcast called the Milk Bottle eCommerce Show, which you should definitely check out. And joining us once again from the Optily side of things is our CEO, Brendan Hughes. So welcome to the show, Keith and Brendan.
Nina, hi, how are you?
Hey Keith, great to have you on board.
Good to see you, Brendan. We did speak in the past, so it's nice we have a camera, I think, this time. And Nina, I've heard a good few episodes of the show, and well done. And it's really nice to talk to you today.
Awesome, great to hear. Thanks so much. All right, so let's get into things. And why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? How it is you got into the world of Shopify and marketing, and how you came to be at Milk Bottle Labs?
Yeah, sure. So I started quite a long time ago, actually. When I was in university around 98, 99, I began to buy domain names. And at the time, and Brendan, you look as if you're similar vintage to my good self. I was in university and I had multiple business ideas. That was around the time of the whole first phase, the first .com kind of a revolution. And at that time, it was really easy to register domain names. But e-commerce was, I don't think I'm exaggerating to say e-commerce was well in its infancy and it was closed off to the consumer. I mean, we take Stripe now and Shopify for granted nowadays, but in actual fact, like back in the late 90s, it was only enterprise customers that could even access, security and encrypted systems to take online payments. So I ended up with over about 300 domain names. And every time I went to attempt to create an online store around a domain name, unfortunately, the facilities weren't there to do that. And I remember one occasion, I think I was quoted by a software development company about £600,000 at the time to develop an online store. So times are very, very different. Of course, I didn't know at the same time, a few years later, Toby, the CEO of Shopify, would actually create that platform for people like me and people, and D2C brands right now. So I held on to the names and I sat back, and in the meantime, I figured that I should probably educate myself a little bit better. So I did a postgraduate in e-commerce at the time, after college, and just as we all graduated from a university out in Blackrock in County Dublin, the .com crash occurred. So that was kind of goodbye to that, in the short term. The interesting thing about domain investing is that the domain names that I kept from 1999 are relatively valuable because Google is indexing domain names based on the length of the word, but also the length of the duration of the registration. So I still actually have quite a lot of them. And in the meantime, in the interim, I kept kind of reading up on e-commerce, following the market. I ended up in telecoms. I traveled the world. I lived in Australia, traveled through the States, traveled through Asia, and then spent the majority of my career actually in telecoms. But in the back of my head, I was always playing with ideas, and I was always creating things. And because there was no e-commerce platform available, I actually started selling on eBay. And then Shopify arrived. So I actually found Shopify around 2009, 2010, and I could not believe, I was living in Bermuda at the time, and I couldn't believe that this platform actually existed, where you entered your email address and you put up a photo of your product. I was absolutely blown away. I remember at the time my brother was living in New York, and I sent him an email. And I went, look, this is just, because this was joining together all of the pieces that I knew were missing. And of course, Toby, the CEO of Shopify, is a developer, a super clever individual. And instead of actually looking at it and thinking about it, he actually had the same problem, and he actually went and he created a solution. And now, of course, we have this behemoth of a company which has now over 2 million subscribers. So that's kind of the history of my e-commerce journey. The journey directly into Shopify is slightly different. When I found Shopify, it wasn't available in Ireland. And I waited and I waited, and eventually it became available in Ireland. And I signed up to a series of 14-day trials, and I built stores really, really quickly. And then eventually they had a partner program, and I had built a couple of stores, and I realized that the domain experience and all of the kind of other study and the reading, I actually found that I actually understood e-commerce, and Shopify was simply the tool that was going to bolt together the domain with the payment gateway and all of these things. And after a few stores, Shopify approached me, and I became a Shopify partner, and I believe probably one of the first 25 or 30 experts worldwide. And that's it. Then Milk Bottle Labs was born. That's the story.
And Keith, maybe for people who don't know, so Milk Bottle Labs is the foremost and most well-known Shopify platform builder, right, in the Irish market. And but actually, I'm curious about the name of the company. Where did that come from?
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, so we're accredited Shopify experts. So we're actually the only full-time dedicated Shopify agency. The word experts is kind of a term I'm not 100% comfortable with. Brendan, as an Irishman, you'd know probably it's not. We don't call ourselves experts very easy, but that's the term they use. You're either a Shopify partner, which is basically just an affiliate, or you're a Shopify expert. So they graded our work, and they continuously grade our performance, and we're in touch with Shopify a lot. And the name is funny. When I realized that I believe there was a market in Ireland for Shopify experts, and then I got the expert status, it was time to actually make something official. And I was down on a farm. I'll shorten the story. I was down on a farm in County Laois in Ireland, and they had just got delivery of a brand new milking parlour. And I walked into this shed, and there was a massive big bottle, and it was shaped like an old milk bottle that we would have had, Brendan, when we were kids. Nina, I don't know whether you remember or not, but there used to be glass bottles outside the houses. And I just got this, I had a notebook, and I was writing down names, and I drove home, and I just come up with this name, and it was just, that's just not a very interesting story, but that's the history of it. So it's funny. In inside we use. I'll refer to this in a few minutes. But we use Basecamp as our project management tool. So we name projects internally based on, ice cream or cream or full fat or low fat. So it's internally within the team. It allows us to have a little bit of humor around customers and around projects. But on a serious note, I was looking for something which was absolutely instantly recognizable, and people would remember it, and it stuck. Thankfully, it stood the test of time, and it's people relate it to Shopify very quickly, so I think it works.
Yeah, it does, and it's a uniquely Irish way to name a company. So well done.
Yeah, I don't think have I ever publicly told that story. You got that one out of me, Brendan, but thanks. Yeah.
Awesome. So speaking of your team and your organizational system, why don't you take us through what your typical onboarding process looks like with a new client? What steps do you take to evaluate how to get them up and running with the least amount of friction?
Yeah, so I suppose we do a number of things. We build greenfield Shopify stores, and then we upgrade Shopify stores. So if you're an existing, what has happened as a result of COVID is a lot of customers have self-built their Shopify stores, and Shopify is a wonderful platform, and you can do everything yourself, but generally there's gaps are left in that build process. So we have a lot of customers that are coming to us after hitting decent revenues during COVID, and now they're getting us to upgrade the stores. And also Shopify in COVID released Online Store 2. So we're upgrading customers from the old platform to the new front-end platform, which is a big chunk of our work in 2022. And then we also migrate customers over to the platform, which is a bigger project, Nina, more complex. So you have to make sure that there's no downtime on the existing site, and Shopify makes that easy. And then I suppose the fourth thing that we do is there's a struggle within e-commerce for staff. And we have a lot of brands that are actually using us as outsourced e-commerce managers. So rather than hiring somebody, they would hire us for a fixed period every month, and then we will stay ahead, and we know what to change on the store and keep the store up and running and protected. And what that allows the business owner to do is to focus on running their business. So we call that Shopify performance management. So they're the main kind of areas of the business. So the onboarding process that we have is actually really, really simple. If a customer comes to us and they're leaving their existing agency and they're stressed and there's problems and unfortunately, they were unhappy with the relationship, we board everybody into Basecamp. And then what we do is we focus on the things that we can fix. Our onboarding process and our kind of project management process is really, really simple. We run in sprints. We use Basecamp, and what that does is it reduces any email. Okay, so I came from the corporate sector and worked in, as I mentioned, worked in telecoms for many years, and everything was run off email. And if there was a thread, there could be 50 or 60 emails, and the really important spreadsheet gets caught in the last email or the second last email, and things get dropped. So what we do is we work with the client and we bring them into Basecamp, and Basecamp becomes the core center for all of our communication, for all of the storage of digital assets. So as an example, if we're building a new store, the first thing that we'll need is that we need a style guide or a digital asset set for logos, mobile, maybe flats, proofs for designs, that kind of thing. And we'll open up an area in Basecamp, and the client will simply drop all of the files into that area. And what that does is that reduces emails before the project ever starts. Once the project starts, whether it be any one of the projects I mentioned, we have a regular kind of a check-in call with that client. And then what that does is that further reduces the need or the confusion for constant messages. So what we do basically is reduce the confusion for the client. And by the time the project actually ends, most clients are actually quite surprised at how they kind of adapted to Basecamp, because the minute you mention project management, most people just expect it to be on email. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter about the scale of that customer, Nina. If that customer is we're at the moment upgrading a very well-known Irish client that has 5,000 SKUs, but we've just launched a store will launch this week that has 2 SKUs. So the principles are absolutely identical. It does not matter about the scale of the customer. We don't treat anybody any differently just because they're doing 10 million a year or they're doing 0 revenue. We assess whether the customer is a good fit, if they have the resources to communicate with us. And ultimately, the boarding process for every customer is actually the very same.
Can I ask you there, because you mentioned it in some of those different scenarios, is there's a decision point for people. They can do it themselves. The great thing about Shopify is they can start themselves and they can get their products up and running and get their catalog kind of launched. What are the typical pain points that people say, I now need to go to Milk Bottle Labs? Or like, where would you say to people, when you reach this point, you probably need help, expert help? So what's that inflection point? Yeah.
That's a really good question, Brendan. There's a number of ways to answer that. I suppose myself and Peter, Peter Corkery, who's the other half of Milk Bottle, my business partner, who joined very quickly after I had named the entity. Peter says customers don't know what they don't know. Okay? And that sounds like a loose term, but it's actually very defined. The fact is that if you take a shop, like if I go back to 2010 or 2011, when I mentioned earlier on that I was launching stores and building on trials and building stores, there was only one sales channel in Shopify, and it was the Shopify store. And then Shopify launched Shopify POS. Now you have TikTok. Now you have Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat. You've got Google. Google is constantly changing its AdWords platform. And it also made a major update. The Google page experience update last year was a major search update. So what happens is that it's very easy to set up your TikTok account, and it's very easy to set up a Google AdWords account. I mean, Google will convince you that you can also do that yourself. But it gets to a point where you're shipping product and your business scales very, very quickly. And a lot of businesses that started out in COVID, they're still one-man shows. So on one hand, it's when should you talk to us? I suppose when you've run out of resources. But also when you realize that in actual fact, you may actually be relatively successful, but you're always going to be missing something unless you get professional services. I always tell people, I'm a bit of a petrol head and I love classic cars, and I can, no problem, service my car, change the oil. But if I give that to a mechanic, which I do, he will always find something else that I didn't see, or that I wasn't looking for, or that maybe I just didn't have the time to look for. A classic example is the Rewind app, which is a Canadian company that produce a very simple app called Rewind. Like, we've had a number of customers that have come to us, for example, and they've said that staff or outsourced developers have made mistakes and deleted products. So the first thing we do, we don't work in any store without adding the Rewind app. And that starts at about $3 a month. And straight away, if anything gets deleted, Shopify doesn't store it. You can wind your store back using Shopify. So I suppose to answer your question, the point at which people talk to us is it could be the resources. They've no time the business is not scaling as a result of the fact they've no time or no resources. It could be revenue. Most e-commerce entrepreneurs won't pay an agency at the start because they know they can do it themselves. But then when they get to a decent revenue, I don't know what that number is. It could be $500,000 for some people, or it could be 5 million for others. They realize that just like they outsource their accountant, just like they outsource their PPC agency, they should probably outsource Shopify to an agency. And there's a big gap there. I don't think Shopify store owners realize that in actual fact, it's not a good thing to add 40 apps to your store. A decent agency can actually make those changes with simple, 2 and 3 lines of code and increase the speed of your store. And finally, what I would say is that when customers look at our portfolio, they just see stores that, we've put a bit of thought into, and they just want what they know they can't deliver on their own. Does that answer the question, or is that long-winded?
No, it is. And I guess there's a process of education, right? And as you said, maybe the best way to do it is when people, because it's very easy to see if a store is a Shopify store, and if you can see what good looks like, look at your portfolio and look at the top Shopify stores, and you can't do that yourself by and large, right? You need help to get to that next level.
Yeah, now I will say in defense of anybody who has done that, like the Shopify theme store has also just gone through kind of an injection of energy in the last, it was closed for a long time and it reopened probably 18 months, 2 years ago. And if you have decent photography and you have access to a decent designer for digital assets, for logos, that kind of thing, there's absolutely no doubt about it that people can make a stab of it. I would never, ever deny that. But I always bring it back to, the mechanic. I mean, I don't, or you probably don't, or Nina, you probably don't cut your own hair. You go to a professionally trained individual that can cut hair. The interesting thing about web design, Brendan, is that most people think they're all web designers. It's absolutely phenomenal. We recently did 50% of our portfolio is not on our site because within about a week, and this is one of the weaknesses of Shopify, within about a week, the social media manager for a lot of our clients, for example, will just go in and start moving sections around, changing images, breaking the site, taking out sections that we coded for a reason because we fixed a solution that the client gave to us. And it's a bit mad. Like web design, I might as well tell you this one. Another trend that we get is that people say to us, and they're talking to us really seriously in a meeting, you know what, Keith? We spent 25,000 euros on our e-commerce site, 7 or 8 years ago before anybody was caught onto Shopify, and the developer just disappeared and he ran away with the keys. And is, just based on that bad experience, can you do better on the price? So as a result of one bad experience, they're trying to bring the bad experience into the next experience with their next agency. Now, me personally, if I blew 25,000 on a bad business decision, I wouldn't be telling anybody. But a lot of busy entrepreneurs, they just treat the website as a cost center, when in actual fact, if they invested in it with professional people, they would actually turn it into a revenue generator. And that's been my experience over the last few years. And that's why people should use any professional service, whether it be, as I say, a mechanic or a hairdresser or an accountant.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you mentioned the Rewind app. Are there any other kind of go-to tools or apps that you pretty much recommend across the board to anyone with a Shopify store?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's been a massive influx of app developers into this ecosystem in the last, especially since COVID. I think there's over 4,000 now. So 5 years ago, I would have been able to list off 4 or 5 upsell apps, for example, but now there's probably 50 that do the same thing. So we use Rewind. Another wonderful app that we use for email is Klaviyo. Okay, and the single biggest revenue generator that I see on any Shopify store is automated email, Nina. And anybody, now whatever about building your own Shopify store, just make sure you get somebody to do your Klaviyo. And I recently did an audit of 5 stores where we've built out their Klaviyo and we managed the Klaviyo. And the 5 stores had done 25 million down to 50,000 a year. And each of them was getting 25% of their revenue through automated email. So when I talk about automated email, I talk about abandoned carts, browse abandon, and then a simple offer of €5 or $5 off your first order. If you're not using automated email, you are seriously leaving revenue on the table. one of the kind of sales pitches that I give people, if you're going to invest with us, let's put in Klaviyo automated email as well, because that actually pays for the investment. So that's a really clever thing to do, is to use more systems which are automated to actually fund, your business expansion. There's one really nice email that we use. It's by Bjorn Forsberg, and it's called Orderly Emails and Orderly Print. And I can see Brendan nodding there. Bjorn is very well known within the Shopify ecosystem.
Yeah.
Lovely guy, very helpful. And also he's kind of building in public, as they say, within the app community. He's sharing information, and he's a very helpful individual. But Bjorn, Nina, has a set of apps that will create, for example, a beautiful template to place in your order when you've printed your order, to go into the box when you're shipped to the customer. And one weakness of Shopify is that the standard emails to say, thank you for your order, or your order is on the way, are a very simple template. And what another one of Bjorn's apps, Orderly Emails, actually allows you to design that email set in line with your brand guidelines and your colors. And it can also we would then match that with Klaviyo. So what that means is it brings consistency across your brand for all of your outbound communication. Really simple app that fixes a kind of a boring problem. I'd highly recommend looking at that. In terms of reviews is the gap that we see. And Yoni is a friend of ours in Lux.io. They've created a wonderful reviews app called Lux, which we put into a lot of stores, and I highly recommend that. And what that does is it allows the review email goes out to the customer after a certain time, and it allows the customer to leave a review, add a photo or a video if they want, and you can reward the customer for leaving the photo or the video. The beauty about that is the fact that it's pushing the customer to create unique content. So it's what I call Google Gold. So like, we have customers that have 10 or 15,000 Lux reviews on their site, which all contain individual content, and so Google loves it. So it's a prime example of where you can kind of hit two birds at one stone, because you're getting reviews and you're getting your 5 stars, your 4 stars. But in addition to that, you're also feeding Google with unique content every single day of the week as the reviews are published. So if I was to look at two apps, I'd look at Bjorn, and I'd look at Bjorn's Orderly Emails, Orderly Print app, and also Lux. But in terms of a platform that I think people should look at, I would look at Klaviyo. MailChimp is a wonderful platform as well, and there's multiple other email platforms. We just have a lot of success with Klaviyo.
Yeah. That's great, and I'll make sure to put all of those in the show notes below. Great. So you mentioned that, there's definitely companies out there who are doing it right on their own, but I'd like to ask you, what kind of Shopify store do you look to as a model, so that someone who's starting off can be like, I like what they're doing, I'm just going to rip it off? Like, who's like kind of doing it right?
I wouldn't do that. Yeah, a friend of mine runs an agency in New York called One Rockwell. And if I was to point anybody in the direction of beautiful stores, just head to Paul's business and have a look at his portfolio. He's doing some work with pretty much most of the top New York fashion brands. And it's interesting to watch what's going on over there, because what happens in New York generally, or Los Angeles in terms of fashion, generally sets the bar 2 years before the rest of the world. And Paul, I believe, is involved in the Kylie Cosmetics store. So the Kylie, for anybody who doesn't know, Kim Kardashian's younger sister has Kylie Cosmetics. I believe it's one of the most successful Shopify stores in the world, if not the most successful. And it's actually been split now into 4 different stores. And the effort and the energy, now they obviously have big budgets. I mean, you're talking hundreds of millions, but the effort and the energy they put into digital assets, and the simplicity, sign up to their newsletter, the simplicity of their newsletter built on Klaviyo is just absolutely phenomenal. And when people try to overcomplicate e-commerce design or overcomplicate the customer experience, I generally point them to those 2 stores. The other store is Skims, which is Kim Kardashian's store. They're the 2 stores that I generally point people to. If I was to look at a local store, my personal favorite client, we've 2 or 3 really, really great customers, and one of them is Mars Pharmacy, which is owned by Una O'Hagan, who's a wonderful entrepreneur in the pharmacy sector. And the reason I point Una out here now is because Una is operating across the omnichannel in retail and online, and she's had massive success online. We also work very closely with Lula Jewellery, just off Grafton Street, Louise Stokes, who has another wonderful, energetic entrepreneur who has made success again in the omnichannel using Shopify POS and Shopify. And again, Louise is a designer. She has a wonderful eye for design, and the site that we've built for her is slightly minimalist, and it's just something a little bit different, and it works, which is nice. The one interesting store that we built a good few years ago, and we're still interacting with the client, is schoolbooks.ie. And this store is not a fashion store, it's a bookstore, but it's heavily driven by data. So if you're selling a complicated product with a barcode or an identifier code, like books, for example, have barcodes, they have ISBN numbers, they have, I think, IEN numbers. And we have actually used the data that Paul and the team in Schoolbooks are actually based down in Tralee in County Kerry. We've used a massive amount of data, and we've brought that data to the front of every product on the site, and then that's been indexed by Google. So that's a prime example of how kind of the boring stuff can be brought to the front. And that's a wonderfully, wonderfully successful, very high performing site. And it's utilitarian in a way because it's a purchase that people kind of have to make. But Paul and the team, along with our own development team, have made that experience, I believe, kind of an easier one than normal. So there's a few sites, Nina, that I would point to.
Keith, you mentioned your own journey started in eBay and then you discovered Shopify as it was emerging. I'm guessing a lot of your clients are in marketplaces such as Amazon, and obviously now in the US we've got Walmart, etc. Are there any tips or any tools that you advise your clients on to help bridge the gap between what they're doing on the marketplaces, what's happening on their D2C channel? Like, so how do you help clients with that?
Brendan, I'll be honest with you, we actually don't.
Okay.
No, and I'll tell you why. Because selling on Amazon or selling on a marketplace is a completely different kettle of fish. And none of us could ever claim to have any knowledge of that. Now, I'll just go backwards slightly. There is apps that we recommend to connect the two. But in actual fact, the Amazon story is interesting. Obviously Amazon is growing. It's growing at a massive pace. Remember, my family works for Amazon and they can't even hire quick enough. It's ridiculous, the scale of the business. But we're actually, we've probably been involved in more projects where we've taken people off Amazon, because when a merchant sells on Amazon, obviously they don't have access to the data. So I'm certainly not anti-Amazon, but I couldn't claim to have any knowledge of Amazon. That's actually a very good question. Now, there is apps that connect to Amazon, but for example, if we localize the conversation back to Ireland, you can't connect an Irish store to Amazon. It has to be US registered or UK registered. So that's not opened up yet, unless it's changed recently. You can connect eBay very, very easily with a number of different apps. I actually can't. I wouldn't be able to give too much knowledge on that question.
And is it the data is the reason that you see people migrating from the marketplaces, as well as obviously the margin, right? But they don't own the customer, I guess, is the biggest problem, right?
Exactly. And Klaviyo's tagline up to a few months ago was, own your customer, so own your customer data. I remember speaking to a client in a loan about a couple of years ago, and he told me a horror story where he had invented a sock. You hear these stories everywhere, but this seems to be real, where he invented a sock prevented deep vein thrombosis when he was flying. And he told me that within about 12 weeks, he started to sell about 600,000 a month on Amazon. And it turned out then it just stopped pretty much in the space of a week. And he found out after that his supplier in China had copied the product and put it back up on Amazon himself, and then outbid him on the advertising platform and put him out of business in, I suppose, well, he probably exaggerated, it was probably out of business in a couple of months. Whereas in Shopify, so I suppose the way I see Amazon is that your journey to sales in Amazon is much quicker. Okay, but your journey to sales in Shopify is you have to either buy that customer using social media, which you now have to buy, or Google AdWords or whatever advertising platform. But when you gain that customer and recruit that customer, and if you treat that customer properly, again, possibly using automated email, you can actually resell to that customer. So the customer lifetime value is the customer is harder to recruit independently on Amazon. It's a longer investment. It's harder to recruit on Shopify. And it's a harder investment, but most people will go for the easy trick. And there's actually a couple of very well-known brands in the US have spent years on Amazon and have realized that it doesn't suit their business. It does suit plenty of business. It's a wonderful platform. And, I'm reading about them, and they're moving off, and they're slowly ramping up their investment in Shopify and degrading their investment in Amazon. And eventually it takes people probably 2 or 3 years to migrate off it if they plan on that.
Yeah, no, agreed. And look, we see that as well, is in particular in the US market, the massive challenge is is that journey that merchants need to go on, because they're realizing the over dependence on Amazon for their entire business model is very precarious. Some of them are trying, Walmart and Target and some of the other marketplaces, but increasingly they're saying, hey, I can make 50 million on Amazon and I'm only making less than $1 million on my own site. I need to redress that balance. Okay.
Yeah.
Just on the Klaviyo thing, we love Klaviyo and MailChimp as well, and there's other solutions, because especially now, increasingly we're seeing an alignment between what people are doing on their email marketing to their customers with what they're doing in particular in the social channels. So the native integration between, for example, Klaviyo and Facebook and Instagram means you can have the same message to the same people across multiple different channels. So when they're surfing, their social channels, they can see that special offer that you're putting to them and they get it in their inbox. Is SMS marketing something that's kind of prevalent in this market, or has it hit yet?
No, it's not. I've spoken to Klaviyo about this a few times. By coincidence, I actually worked when I was in telecoms, 2005, 2010. I actually managed the wholesale SMS business for one of the mobile networks. So, and at the time there was, you may remember this, Brendan, there was scandals around spam horoscope messages that were eating up people's credit. So in Ireland and the UK, they kind of went through a period of distaste with SMS. Now, to my surprise, it's still it's driving two-factor authentication. So it's not a medium that people are ignoring. But there was, in the middle of COVID, Klaviyo launched SMS, and then Postscript was bought by one of the major app development companies, I think it's Yotpo. In the States and in the UK, it went absolute gangbusters. But for the first time last week, I was actually reading that in actual fact, there's people now tweeting about the reduction in open rates, and people are, there's very little you can do with an SMS other than track the link, obviously, to the sale, whereas email, you have much more metadata that you can rely on. So I actually would predict that it will actually drop off slightly. It is absolutely a wonderful medium. I mean, if you have an average order value, which is over $200 or €200, and you've got a set of VIP clients that you want to give them a specific deal, absolutely, it's definitely a medium that you should consider. Whether you hang your business on that or not, I think I would be skeptical about it. But I'll just jump in and I was at a conference last week and I did a bit of a fireside, and I was talking about Klaviyo. Just to the listeners that haven't used Klaviyo, one of the most successful emails that we see in Milk Bottle Labs is a thank you email after you ship the product to your customer. A lot of customers don't like getting emails. They go straight into spam. And one of the biggest problems that we're seeing in the States at the moment is emails that are automatically going into the marketing tab in Google, and then the user doesn't actually see the email. But if you were to consider Klaviyo or any automated email platform tomorrow, if you automate an email which is written in courier font, and it's a very simple email, once you know the product has been fulfilled, and just thank the customer and sign it as the business owner or the customer care support manager or whatever, you'll be very, very surprised the reaction you will get to that email. And it's something that most people never do. Yet in physical retail, we all expect to be thanked. So there's actually ways of matching the experience for customers in online and actually in physical retail. And that's one of the ways that we do it. If a customer buys off you a second time or a third time, you should thank them differently with maybe different text and with a discount. And if somebody buys off you more than 5 times, you should be offering them a subscription. So that's what I would do when it comes to email.
A quick one on that. Why courier font?
There's a perception. Now, just before I answer that, I actually tested this. I run a number of stores myself, and I actually tested it. And the font makes a difference because the courier font gives the user the impression that you've actually typed it.
Okay, very interesting.
Yeah.
I was wondering the exact same thing, Brendan. Yeah. Cool, very interesting.
Can I just say why that is? I don't actually know. It was suggested to me by a member of the team who's a Klaviyo expert. Lydia has way more experience than me in terms of Klaviyo. And it works. It works, yeah.
Gives that typewriter-y feel.
Exactly, yeah.
Sure. Unfortunately, we are all out of time. This has been a really fascinating discussion, but we'd like to end on this final question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, if our listeners come away from this episode with one thing they can start implementing today to accelerate their online business, what would that one thing be?
Thank your customers. Yeah, but wait until set up the automation so that it goes out after the product has been fulfilled, because you don't want to be thanking them for something that's been delayed in the post. Sounds very obvious, but it's happened.
And use courier font.
Absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Keith, Brendan. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, folks.
Yeah, thank you, Keith.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been fun.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Optily Radio, Accelerate e-commerce marketing. We're, of course, brought to you by Optily, the new Shopify app that's revolutionizing how store owners manage their ad spend across Facebook, Instagram, Google, and YouTube. If you're one of the millions who is struggling to know where to spend your marketing dollars for the most impact, try out Optily free for 2 weeks. Watch your returns increase, hours open up in your schedule, and achieve your business goals fast. Learn more at optily.com. We'll catch you back here next time on Optily Radio for more expert tips on growing your online store through marketing. Take care.